Chapter 8. The Question of Identity. Harry defines himself through choices, change, and destiny. Choice is the human ability to decide between two options. If this faculty is well trained, a person is able to discriminate or choose well between options of good and evil, right and wrong, advantage and disadvantage. In each of the Harry Potter stories, we're able to see just what constitutes good choosing. The first dimension of choice is the implicit level. Harry makes two types of choices in every book: about what sort of person he is and about what to do in a crisis, and he consistently chooses what is right over what is easy. Let's look at the choices Harry makes, choices that will define who he is. In each decision, Harry has the option of loyalty to a high and difficult standard versus personal advantage. He chooses, with one exception that has heavy consequences, loyalty to the good. In Philosopher's Stone, Harry asks not to be put in Slytherin House, though Draco Malfoy and the Sorting Hat point to Slytherin as his path to power. At the same time, he chooses to be friends with Ron and Hermione, one poor, the other unpopular, and of questionable lineage, despite being advised, again by Draco, to avoid hanging out with riffraff. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry professes his loyalty to Dumbledore at the risk of being murdered by Riddle/Voldemort, Dumbledore's enemy. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry chooses to spare Pettigrew, who betrayed Harry's parents to their murderer, out of loyalty to his understanding of what his father would have wanted. In Goblet of Fire, Harry refuses to reconcile with Ron, despite loneliness and friendship for Ron, and loyalty to the truth. Later, in the same book, Harry withstands persecution by the media, unabashed again, because of his commitment to standing with what is true over what others think. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry chooses the easy way, not to study occlumency with Snape and before bed, and the consequence is serious as coming to the Department of Mysteries to rescue Harry, and dying in battle. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry chooses to ignore Dumbledore's unqualified trust in Severus Snape, and Ron and Hermione's skepticism about Draco being the youngest Death Eater in favor of his age-old prejudice against the Slytherins. The consequences of this surety, in his opinions, play out painfully in Deathly Hallows. In Deathly Hallows, Harry chooses to pursue Horcruxes in obedience to Dumbledore's direction, rather than try to find the Deathly Hallows. He does this despite doubts in Dumbledore's goodness, and out of loyalty to Dobby's sacrificial example. These internal choices are significant, and they are paired in each book with a life or death decision. Each choice occurs as the result of a crisis in which Harry must choose between what is safe and easy for him, versus resisting evil at risk of his life. He chooses each time to do the right, dangerous thing. Consider the following life or death decisions. In Philosopher's Stone, Harry chooses to pass Fluffy and enter the trapdoor in order to keep the stone from Snape and Voldemort. In Chamber of Secrets, he opts to search for the chamber in order to find Ron's sister Ginny, and the chamber he elects to fight Riddle against all odds. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry dives in front of Peter Pettigrew, saving him from Lupin and Black, who have wands drawn to kill him for betraying Lily and James Potter to Voldemort. In Goblet of Fire, Harry chooses to warn Cedric of a giant spider about to attack him, though that would have cleared his way to victory, and the spider turns on Harry. He also chooses to resist and attack Voldemort in the graveyard, again against all odds. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry learns in a dream that Sirius is being tortured by Death Eaters and rushes to his rescue. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry learns about almost simultaneously of the mission to find the cave Horcrux and of a man who is celebrating in the Room of Requirement, which he rightly assumes is a sign that Malfoy has completed his assignment. Harry chooses to go with Dumbledore and to call up Dumbledore's army to patrol the castle in their absence. In Deathly Hallows, Severus's memories reveal to Harry that he must die if Voldemort is to be defeated, and that he must die without fighting back. Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest and lays down his life voluntarily. Harry's choices deliver the implicit message: do the hard, right thing. Don't take the easy, advantageous route. What does Dumbledore teach us about choice in his decisions with Harry and others? You guessed it, your choices are what matter, and choose what is right over what is easy. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry is confronted repeatedly with suggestions that he is somehow akin to the Dark Lord. He learns at the end from both Voldemort and Dumbledore that there is some truth in that. Harry then asks Dumbledore if he should have been put in Slytherin House, where Harry believes the Sorting Hat thought he belonged. Dumbledore responds that while Harry has much in common with Voldemort and the Slytherins, he is different from the bad guys, largely because he asked not to be put in Slytherin House. It is our choices, Harry, that show who we truly are, far more than our abilities. Dumbledore reemphasizes the relative importance of our choices compared with our birthright in Goblet of Fire. Confronting the stuffed shirt Minister of Magic, he bears Fudge's prejudice by pointing to the fate of Barty Crouch Jr. He says, "Your Dementor has just destroyed the last remaining member of a pure-blood family as old as any, and see what that man chose to make of his life? Your life is of value only if you choose the good over what is easy and evil." Dumbledore drives this point home in Churchill like cadences to the assembled Hogwarts student body in the conclusion of his tribute to Cedric Diggory, when he says, "Remember, if the time should come when you have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy, remember what happened to a boy who was good and kind and brave because he strayed across the path of Lord Voldemort." So we have the implicit treatment of choice in what choices Harry makes, and we have the explicit dimension in Dumbledore's talks on choice. Harry is often forced to make these difficult choices during the scenes of greatest drama, when we are most engaged in the story. In this way, we identify with Harry and make the choice with him, usually amazed at our own virtue. In her treatment of choice, Rowling engages us, not in the choosing per se, as it was when dying with Harry, but in the goodness we experience as we choose the harder, virtuous, self-sacrificing option with Harry. C.S. Lewis called this training in the stock responses, and thought it the responsibility of the better writer. Rowling stands with Lewis in using her art to assist our growth in virtue, and her readers like that a lot. We participate imaginatively with the characters when they make good choices, and this reading experience positively influences the decision-making in our own lives, sort of like vitamins for the soul. Choices aren't that big a deal, of course, except in the context of change or personal transformation. Dumbledore chides Fudge for not understanding that it is choice, not blood, that shapes the human person, and Draco Malfoy is always telling Harry the same thing. Even the bad guys understand that your choices shape who you become. Choices we make both reflect the character we have and shape the character we will have. This is the same idea as keeping your house clean. It reflects the value you give order, and it shapes and confirms this priority in your life. Now that we have discussed choice in Harry Potter, let's move on to a look at the consequences of our choices. That is, what we become, our changes and transformations. Change in Harry Potter. Transfiguration is a required course in the Hogwarts curriculum. Transfiguration comes from the Latin trans, meaning across, hence motion, change, and figura, meaning form, appearance, shape. In other words, shape-changing. Young wizards and witches at Hogwarts are taught from the first year on the basics of turning beetles into buttons, up to the advanced magic. Not with teacher approval, it seems, of turning your friend into a badger. Even though the Transfiguration's masters we meet in the stories are usually good guys, not all shape-changers are good. There is, for example, a rather nasty creature called a boggart that we meet in Prisoner of Azkaban that takes on the appearance of what a person fears most, and it can be dispersed by a ridiculous charm and laughter. Humor is a valuable weapon in fighting fear and evil. One of the more poetic aspects of Transfiguration is that those who take the shape of animals become animals that are metaphors for their human characters. When Moody punishes Malfoy for attacking Harry when his back is turned, the sneaky and rodent-like Draco becomes a ferret that Moody bounces up and down with his wand. Hagrid tries to turn Dudley into a pig, but only succeeds in giving him a curly pig's tail because, as he explains, Dudley is so much like a pig, there wasn't much left to do. The obnoxious and nosy reporter Rita Skeeter of course, becomes a bug for the purpose of eavesdropping, as an illegal and unregistered animagus. If Harry's choices are good, and good choices mean good changes, then we should see Harry changing via his choices and experiences from a child to a more mature, in-control, self-monitoring human animal, if you will, over the course of each year at Hogwarts. Not as exciting as watching Malfoy change into a ferret, perhaps, if his choices seem to be confirming him in that role, but Harry's changes should be almost as dramatic. In fact, they are. When we meet Harry in Philosopher's Stone, he is a victim of his stepfamily's abuses and seemingly has no heritage. He has become, by book's end, a victor in battle against the Dark Lord and the heir of his family's legacy. How? It is through his heroic choices, in which he chooses the good over his personal gain. Chamber of Secrets, too, opens with Harry, literally and figuratively, a prisoner. The Dursleys have locked him in his room, and he is moored in his own self-doubts and self-pity. He saves Ginny from her enchantment by the Dark Lord and escapes the chamber at the end of the book on the wings of a phoenix, in every sense a free man. This transformation from prisoner to liberator is again a function of his choosing what is right rather than what is easy. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry's transformation is more profound than in any other book in the series until Order of the Phoenix. Prisoner of Azkaban opens with Harry not at all in control of his passions. Vernon Dursley's sister, Aunt Marge, patronizes Harry as an unwelcome burden on her brother, and at last insults him and his parents as an example of bad blood and poor breeding. Marge is a bulldog fancier, and given her name and the bulldog's being to Britain what the eagle is to America, I have to suspect she is a rather transparent character of Margaret Thatcher and her uncharitable opinions about dole recipients. Harry's response? He tries some self-control techniques to ignore her, but of course fails. He has too many unresolved feelings and unanswered questions about his parents' death, and especially about his dad, to suffer Aunt Marge gladly. In a rage, and without a wand, Harry makes this woman so full of herself into a three-dimensional picture of her character by blowing her up, not as a bomb blows up, but as a balloon. Aunt Marge and her bulldog point to Margaret Thatcher and John Bull, patriots who Rowling believes were self-inflated monsters. Harry experiences the death of his parents again and again in Prisoner of Azkaban, courtesy of the Dementors and a boggart. He learns from his analyst, Dr. Lupin, how to fight off the depression and despair brought on by these nasties. When he learns in the shrieking shack of Pettigrew's Judas-like betrayal, he has been changed so much by his choices in therapy and his consequent enlightenment that not only does he refrain from attacking Pettigrew, but he risks his own life to save Wormtail. Harry has transformed from a passionate child rushing to judgment and punishment on Privet Drive to a young adult capable of great discernment and semi-divine mercy. Both Dumbledore and Black comment that at last Harry is truly his father's son. He has become not really an orphan, but a living image of his father. Harry begins Goblet of Fire as a boy, understandably concerned about what others think and say about him. His experiences and choices following a fight with Ron and an article in the Daily Prophet transform him into a mature young man, more interested in being than seeming. His personal integrity and emotional maturity allow him to rise above popularity concerns or fear of slander. When Rita Skeeter's second article about Harry in the Daily Prophet appears on the morning of the last Triwizard Task, titled Harry Potter, Disturbed and Dangerous, Harry shrugs off her portrayal of him as a troubled mental defective. "Gone off me a bit, hasn't she?" said Harry lightly, folding up the paper. This accomplishment is in a way more remarkable than his successes in the Triwizard Tournament tasks, and in the foundation of his ability to fight Voldemort to a draw at the Dark Lord's rebirthing party. The primary characters in Harry Potter, although mostly children, are never especially childish. By the end of Goblet of Fire, Harry has transformed into a real he-man of sacrificial virtue and is nearly a superhero. In the opening of Order of the Phoenix, Harry is a caged animal who looks outside himself for his bearings. He digs in garbage cans for newspapers and fights to listen to the evening news for some word about Voldemort's return. By the end of the book, the exterior world has stripped Harry of everything about himself because of the choices he makes to speak the truth and be loyal to his friends. Though he never learns the introverted skill of occlumency, his losses through the year, and especially the death of his godfather Sirius, turn him inside out from the year's start. By the end of the book, Harry has learned to look to his heart for his bearings and to the world for very little. When we meet Harry in Half-Blood Prince, he is half asleep, looking through a glass darkly, waiting for Dumbledore, and very much in doubt that Albus will come, though the headmaster had written in no uncertain terms that he would come. Harry testifies to Scrimgeour at Story's End after Dumbledore's funeral that he is Dumbledore's man through and through, and that he feels his mentor's presence in death more nearly than he did while living. Harry's faith in Dumbledore comes under sharp attack in the opening of Deathly Hallows, and it is an effective attack. At a low point, he tells Hermione that Dumbledore never shared the truth with Harry, and that the headmaster didn't love him. By book's end, however, the headmaster explains to him that Harry is the better man because of his selfless choices and sacrifices made despite his doubts. One aside here. As we talked about earlier, much of the imagery of change in the Potter novels springs from the tradition of alchemical symbolism in English literature. Every Potter book ends with a superheated crucible scene, or rubedo, in which the characters reveal themselves and transform into greater or lesser people. Dissolution, purification, and perfection, the three stages of the alchemical great work, and of changing the human soul from lead to gold, are reflected in Harry's transformations. Perhaps the formula of good, hard choices make good people strikes you as a little simplistic, leaving out as it does both ideas of fate or destiny, and even the seeming arbitrariness of who is born into which families, the big sorting hat. This fate or free will question hangs over English literature. As it is often posed, the fate/free will question goes something like this. God sees all and knows all, past, present, and future. So in what sense can human beings be said to act freely? If all human action is foreordained in God's knowledge, this contradicts the idea of human freedom and God's revelation that He longs for our free will decision to live in communion with His divine will. In less theological language, the question has been posed as a matter of our programming. Are we simply programmed machines of matter and energy designed to reproduce our specific programming? From this perspective, even acts of self-sacrifice are understood as defenses of the local gene pool. Free will and altruism are fictitious concepts, no more, no less. This is no small matter. You read every day or hear from friends about how circumstances outside someone's control, fate, destiny, or even providence determine a person's actions and character. Perhaps they grew up poor in a bad neighborhood or with parents who neglected and beat them. The Harry Potter books have a different, sobering emphasis. Whereas our popular culture often excuses people based on their circumstances, these books raise the question of responsibility for our actions and point out that our choices have moral significance. The Harry Potter books take aim at the "you're as good or bad as your programming" position. Again and again, we see that it's our choices that shape us. If we make the good, hard choices against evil, we will become a better person. But it's clear that even Rowling's characters are born with a destiny. As hinted strongly in the first books and revealed outright in Order of the Phoenix, Harry has been born with a mother load of responsibility. In 3 stages, we've come to think of Harry as more than the sum of his choices. First, it was the King Arthur references. From the opening of Philosopher's Stone, the parallels with the legend of King Arthur are remarkable. Harry and Arthur are both orphans, hidden and protected by grand wizards. Harry's being shown respect by the Chess King in Philosopher's Stone points to his innate royalty. Even the magical sky ceiling above the Great Hall at Hogwarts is an exact copy of the enchanted ceiling above the Round Table at Camelot. And just as Arthur pulls a sword from a stone to show he is the rightful heir to the throne, so Harry pulls the sword of Godric Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat in Chamber of Secrets. Harry's love for and romance with, in Half-Blood Prince, Ginny Weasley, whose first name is Ginevra, a variant of Guinevere, is just icing on the Arthurian cake. Second, we have the heir of Gryffindor references. Besides Harry being called a true Gryffindor by Dumbledore at the end of Chamber of Secrets, and the red and gold sparks that fly from Harry's wand involuntarily when he's angry, the Gryffindor/Slytherin opposition throughout the books points to Harry as the heir of Gryffindor. Both Harry and Voldemort are not from pure blood families. Both Harry and Voldemort grew up as orphans in painful living situations. Both have qualities in common: Parseltongue, resourcefulness, determination, a certain disregard for roles, Tom Riddle says, "We even look something alike. Harry and Voldemort are mirror reflection doppelgangers, the apposition of Harry with Voldemort, the heir of Slytherin." Throughout the book suggests Voldemort knows Harry is heir of Gryffindor. Gryffindor means golden griffin, which is a golden eagle, part lion, and is a pointer to Christ, the King of heaven and earth. Harry, as heir of Gryffindor, is clearly more than your average boy wizard or just the product of his environment and choices. Third and last are the revelations of the prophecy in Order of the Phoenix. We've already seen that Harry or Neville was prophesied before his birth to be the coming vanquisher of Voldemort, complete with a power the Dark Lord knows not. The vanquisher's life is not one he can choose to disregard. The prophecy says in detail that the Dark Lord and his vanquisher have a kill-or-be-killed relationship that isn't to be ducked. Like King Arthur, Harry, as heir of Gryffindor and prophesied vanquisher of the Dark Lord, is a boy with a remarkable career track. So the question, now that we know that Harry was born into this giant-sized destiny, is how important are his choices after all? Wasn't he born to his difficult, heroic choices the same way Malfoy was born to his nasty Slytherin decisions? Isn't his seeming free will just a function of his predestined programming? Rowling takes aim at this view, both in interviews, as she gave at the publication of Half-Blood Prince, and in the narrative of Half-Blood Prince itself. In this book, Dumbledore's big teaching moment comes before the adventure in the cave and the astronomy tower. He enlightens Harry about the difference between fatalism, that is, a future predetermined by God or circumstances to which one is resigned, and human freedom, which in choosing, as best as one can, to meet one's destiny heroically. Here is Harry's reaction. He understood at last what Dumbledore had been trying to tell him. It was, he thought, the difference between being dragged into the arena to face a battle to the death, and walking into the arena with your head held high. Some people perhaps would say that there was little to choose between the two ways, but Dumbledore knew. And so do I, thought Harry with a rush of fierce pride, and so did my parents. That there was all the difference in the world. Harry's conviction that making the choice himself makes all the difference is, of course, put sorely to the test in Deathly Hallows, in which book all the romance of being the chosen one rubs off, leaving Harry alone and chosen seemingly only for an ignominious death. If the reader wants to believe in an existential fatalism, something like Harry sitting at the window staring into the darkness and doubting the arrival of his deliverance, rather than in moral virtue and heroic choice of the good, that reader is fighting the tide of Rowling's message. The human heart thrills in resonance to Harry's heroic decisions. Decisions made, until Dumbledore's revelations at the end of Order of the Phoenix, without knowledge of his destiny, and throughout Deathly Hallows without much hope that his destiny was any help to him at all. Readers around the world share his programming, it seems, to the tune of more than 375 million copies of Harry's stories being sold. If this is only a matter of programming, there seems a prevalent programming in the human person for sacrificial, altruistic, loving service that loyalty to the local gene pool does not explain. Why do readers thrill to Harry's choices if they're just a function of his being the boy born to be king? The answer to this question brings us to the spiritual meaning of choice and change in Harry Potter. Harry, it turns out, has a larger-than-life destiny. Vanquish Voldemort, save the world. But he can realize this destiny only by making the right choices and becoming the sort of person able to defeat the Dark Lord. As an embodiment of love, the power the Dark Lord knows not. He has to transcend his ego concerns, even his inherited prejudices, and the doubts he knows are meaningful reasons not to believe or obey. Yes, Harry has a destiny, but his free will choices are what will make the difference between his realizing his prophesied end or not. Why do readers' hearts around the world thrill to this message? Because human beings everywhere know that they too have a prophesied end in which their choices every day, choices for or against their becoming more loving people and more like God, are the deal makers or breakers. Christians tell us that every person is born as an image of God, created for an eternal life in His presence. We have a choice, however, because of the free will given to us by Him. We can become images in the likeness of God by choosing love over death and sharing in the resurrection of love himself. Or we can choose the easy road of advantage and personal comfort, a metaphor in our hearts for immunity to pain and death. It is our daily choices that make this difference: image or likeness, love or death. Reading Harry Potter is an edifying lift and support for human beings, be they believers looking for a spiritual supplement or non-believers whose only spiritual experience come from the mythic or religious experiences they have from books and movies. As homo religiosus, we have faculties of soul only exercised and satisfied by experiences pointing to and confirming our beginnings and endings in realities that transcend time, space, and mortal concerns. By reading these books and identifying with the hero's good choices, readers get a boost via their imaginations to do the right thing in difficult circumstances themselves. Our circumstances may make these choices relatively hard or obvious, but Harry's choices point us to the ones we must make in order to realize our prophesied destinies as children of God and heirs of the real golden griffin. Ever wonder what a griffin symbolizes or why story symbols are such a big deal? Just make the hard right choice to keep reading and watch as your understanding is transformed.